Wavect, the web-free software company that understands what you want.
Hi everyone, welcome at Wavect. Today with Martin Hanzl, who is the attorney at law and head of new technologies at AJ Law Austria. He is also co-reporter of the project Blockchain and Smart Contracts at the European Law Institute, also known as ELI. And he is also lecturer and startup mentor. And today we talk about legal hurdles when actually launching a decentralized exchange. Thank you, Martin, for being here. It's a pleasure talking with you. And starting out, I would love to give you the opportunity to let us know how does your day look like, what are your passions, what are you working on, and if I missed something, let me know.
Yeah, hi everyone from my side as well, and hi Kevin. Many thanks for having me on the podcast today. As you already said in your kind introduction, Martin Hanzl, attorney at law and at Ernst & Young. We have a lot of different projects when it comes to blockchain and NFT metaverse. I'm there heading the new tech department, so I'm responsible for everything that is about blockchain and or artificial intelligence. And over the last couple of years, actually, we have had a lot of different projects. Currently, we're working on NFTs and NFT and metaverse strategies because NFTs were kind of dead, so to say, at least in my point of view or from my experience, and now they're coming back because also other big corporations want to have a look at NFTs and whether they could use it in their day-to-day business. So that is a big part of our daily work today. And the other big part is in relation to supervisory loans, because as you know, when you are a virtual asset service provider, you have to be registered in the European Union and in every country that you're actually offering the services. And that's what we also do, especially for Austria and also for other countries with our colleagues, together with our colleagues. So that is basically the two topics that we are currently working on the most. And so that is basically what we do in the day. And our day is, we are a team of 6 people now, and at UI Law. We basically start our work a day usually together when with a short call when we talk about open projects and how we can tackle those problems that there might are, because as you might imagine, when being active in the new fields such as new technologies or crypto, from a legal point of view, a lot of things are still not super clear. So we encounter some problems that we need to discuss, and that's what we do in our daily business. And then we try to find solutions that help the businesses to keep up their operations.
That sounds super interesting. From a legal point of view, I can totally imagine a lot of new regulation. Some things might not even be fleshed out yet. And companies are just standing there with no reference points or something. So, well, what to do now?
Yeah, exactly.
And as a lawyer, that's a great time to be alive, right? As we mentioned before the podcast.
a lot of interesting problems actually to solve, and that's what makes it really, really interesting and fun to work in this field.
100%, yeah. You told me earlier that you wrote some kind of a paper about the legal point of view for about decentralized exchanges, right? Short form DEX. Could you let the audience know how would you how would you describe a DEX from a legal point of view, and what's a DEX in general in super short form, so that everyone is on the same page?
Yeah, sure. From a legal point of view, I already said at the beginning, when you want to offer services in relation to virtual assets, you would be obliged to have somehow some kind of a registration with a supervisory authority to be able to be active in the European Union. And those regulations that we have in place now are always directed at a central party, right? Either a natural person or a legal person that is subject to those regulations and that actually also offers those services to the people. You know, like, I mean, you can imagine all the big crypto exchanges, the big crypto players, like from Bitpanda to Coinbase, Kraken, whatever. So you know them. They are subject to those regulations. And what we now had in practice sometimes is that people approach us and ask us, what if we form something similar to such a crypto exchange, but in a totally decentralized way? So like just a smart contract operating on a blockchain, and you can still exchange cryptocurrencies or the like. Would that also fall within the scope of these supervisory laws, and would we need a registration to operate such smart contracts, such decentralized exchange? And the interesting thing here is, and this is something a lawyer very often says, it depends, and it's not quite clear because you always have to analyze every case on a case-by-case basis. But actually, you can break it down to, I think, a few key points. On the one hand, if you have an operation that is totally and fully decentralized, so that there is no person really that can interfere with the smart contract and can interfere with the decentralized exchange, then there are good arguments and good reasons why this, for example, this smart contract should not fall within the classic concept of supervisory laws. However, the question of when something is totally decentralized from a legal point of view is actually quite difficult to answer, right? Because there is the Financial Action Task Force, for example, that also outlined in one of the recent papers that decentralization has to be analyzed on a case-by-case basis, and that there are certain factors that have to be considered when you analyze whether it is decentralized or not. And one of those factors, for example, is whether anyone gets a profit from this smart contract. So, right, whether there are royalties or something like that. And if royalties are to be transferred to a certain wallet address, for example, the Financial Action Task Force argues that this DEX then would not be decentralized anymore, or not decentralized in a way, not decentralized from a legal point of view, at least. So that is quite interesting, because in a few talks we had with people from a more technical point of view, that I would like to know your opinion on that. They would say, well, but it does not change how the smart contract, how the DEX is structured, whether there are royalties or not. Once it's deployed, no one can interfere with it, etc. Otherwise, so it's still decentralized, even if someone benefits from the DEX. But that is something where the law apparently differs from a more technical approach. Because that is something that we think that the supervisory authority would argue that such DEX would not be really decentralized. Although, full disclosure, I'm not aware of any rulings of authorities so far with regard to such decentralized exchanges, right? Because so far, usually if you have a project like that, you would approach the authority prior launching the project. So there are no formal rulings that state that, for example, royalties make a DEX not a decentralized exchange in a legal sense. But to come back, what is your take on that? So if I also may ask a question.
Sure. That's actually super interesting, because when I think, let's say, put it that way, we all have heard about, it's not a DEX, right? But we all have heard about Tornado Cash, for example, which got sanctioned by the OFAC, if I pronounced it correctly. Basically, and even DEXs like Uniswap, for example, then blacklisted the wallets, right, that use that protocol. And yeah, Uniswap profits, as I mentioned, from each trade. So they have to have some kind of supervisory. That totally makes sense. But I can imagine if you even, even if you don't benefit from it and they know who you are, they will force you to still have some kind of gatekeeping to comply with sanctions, for example. That's the extreme case. And so I can imagine, as long as they don't see significant disadvantages for themselves, it might be okay to operate in some kind of decentralized manner, right? Because you could form a DAO as well for some things, and then you're possibly more decentralized again. DAO profits, and then it's again up to discussion. I think it's super asset. I would, if I would start out my career, being a lawyer could be no, definitely a viable choice.
Yeah, I mean, especially in this field, that there's so many questions that are yet to be answered, and yeah, so it makes sense to be a lawyer. So I can make some, I can recommend it to everyone if they're still for new or opt for a new career. But yeah, so circling back, we don't know the answer, right, to that yet. I mean, there are some voices in legal literature that follow this approach from the Financial Action Task Force, and there are others that disagree. And you mentioned that I also wrote an article together with a colleague from the Austrian Financial Market Authority, actually, and we actually concluded that, like, somehow of a middle ground, so to say, that we say, yes, we think there are there could be decentralized exchanges that do not fall within supervisory laws, but only if they're really truly decentralized in a way that no one can interfere with the smart contract, which is a big issue. That, for example, you cannot fix bugs or have a kill switch or something like that. You would really, it would probably really have to be programmed in a way so that once it is deployed, no one can interfere with it at all. And on the other hand, if you have really those royalties and those if you have some kind of a business model behind deploying the DEX, you will most likely fall under the supervisory laws, and you will need a registration in Austria, for example, or a license in other countries to operate your services. But I think that also makes sense, actually.
I think it goes even a step further. If we, look at Uniswap, for example, or in general any DEX, at least the front end is centralized most of the time. Just a regular domain, a regular website, web application, and someone controls that. And even though that the smart contract may be fully decentralized, someone controls the easy interface. And absolutely, that could be, the next
absolutely
level.
And with that you can actually direct on which markets are approached, for example, right? Just starting with the language you're choosing. I mean, English, okay, you can have some kind of a worldwide reach, but when you start introducing other languages like German, Spanish, or whatever, you would target those countries using this language. So, and this is again a choice that has to be made by someone, and then again, could be an indicator that this DEX is not a real DEX in a legal sense, so to say, or at least has components of a centralized exchange as well. But maybe just to touch upon one more thing here, because you also mentioned the DAOs, and that this could be somehow of a combination or something like that, because that is also actually something that we looked at, and also from a legal point of view, it is quite difficult at this stage to implement or to interact with DAOs, especially in countries like Germany or Austria, because we don't really have a legal framework where this DAO could fit in. So that is also difficult from this perspective. And on the other side, it is then again the question whether the DAO is really decentralized, meaning are there, for example, a few people that hold the most of the governance tokens and therefore can influence the decisions, etc. So you see, whenever we talk about decentralization in the context of the law, it is super complicated, and with the usual, so to say, buzzwords, you will not you will not find a solution easily.
Yeah. Yeah, that brings me actually to a point that has nothing to do with a DEX, and I don't want you to force to answer if you don't want to. But when I take this one step further, on a DEX you at least trade on the same blockchain, which means it's traceable, it's more transparent and everything. And there's, as you said, the option at least to make it really decentralized, which also depends, by the way, on the infrastructure, on the blockchain that you're on. That's the next thing, who controls the blockchain. Yeah. But when we think this further, what about bridges, for example, where you trade an asset with another asset on another blockchain, exchange it there, where there has to be some kind of central authority that has control over that interaction, and which enables you to obfuscate your history a little bit better. For example, again, just like with Tornado Cash, but for sure not zero knowledge, I know. But it makes it harder, to do blockchain analysis and things like that. So I'm curious if you have observed any kind of, let's say, steps by the regulators towards bridges, or is that too novel for them right now?
To my experience with the regulator, they are not really looking at bridges yet. I mean, we have been discussing it in our working groups actually with the European Law Institute, for example, also in the groups with the European Commission, because we work closely with the Commission on those proposals and potential principles, etc. And this is definitely a thing that you have to consider and have to makes it also again from a legal perspective much more complicated, because what if, for example, you have something decentralized on the one hand and decentralized on the other hand, and then it is connected with a centralized party, right? So to say, does that make it a centralized transaction? And from my initial assessment, I would say we have a strong indicator that it's somehow centralized then, because we have at least some party again mingling with those two different blockchains, that making sure that they can communicate, or whatever how you want to call it, with each other, and this has to be again attributed to one party. But to make it again a little more tricky, the question is how this bridge is then operated, or by whom it is operated. That's again the next question. So as you can see, we try to answer one question and there pop up 15 follow-up questions.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's crazy space. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. But the good thing is, and that maybe just to give a brief outlook also here, I mean, the European Union and the European Commission, we are actually approaching some kind of a new era, so to say, when it comes to crypto regulation, because the markets in crypto assets regulation, the MiCA, we now have kind of a final wording of the regulation, and this regulation will make it possible to have to operate exchanges or issue tokens on a European level, which will make it much easier to really scale your business model on a European level, because you will not have to, comply with every country's national law. So that is something to end on a positive note here also, and, because this is definitely something we as lawyers are looking forward to, and to my understanding, also a lot of players in the field are looking forward to this, because then they expect lawyers to give them clearer answers to their questions, because now, as I said at the beginning, it is very often it depends.
Yeah. Yeah, proper regulation is bullish. Let's put it that way to get a little bit of
Agree.
yeah. One thing that I observed, for example, with some large NFT mints, for example, and I can imagine it might be the same maybe for decentralized exchanges. For centralized exchanges, that's already the case, right? What about KYC or similar gatekeepers? Have you some insights here, or did you see something like
This is
that?
this is actually a very good question and very tricky question, because just at first a disclaimer. Again, it has to be analyzed on a case-by-case basis, because in that aspect, really every case differs from the other, and we have already analyzed quite a few cases, or a lot of cases, and hardly ever those cases were similar to each other. But having said that, when we fall within the classic supervisory laws, like for example, that you need a registration as virtual asset service provider in Austria or in any other country, you are obliged to conduct KYC, and those requirements. So you need to identify your customer and have a proof of funds, etc., depending on the actually trading volume, etc. So all those obligations. Now the question that we had in the past, and that is again back on the table, so to say, with NFTs, is whether those NFTs would also fall within the scope of these supervisory laws, meaning whether NFTs would qualify as a so-called virtual currency within the Austrian law, or within any other member states law, because at least the basic principles are based on a European level, on a European directive, so they're quite similar, so to say, or at least a little bit similar. They should be similar. So let's put it like that. But the question is whether those NFTs, for example, would fall within the definition of a virtual currency. And if so, they would need also to conduct the KYC procedures that virtual asset service providers need to conduct, and potentially also need to register as virtual asset service provider. In most cases, again, depending on the NFT, but what we have seen in the past as classic NFT, let's put it like that, like Bored Apes, for example. Those NFTs would typically not qualify as virtual currency under the AML5 directive, and therefore you would, if you only issue those NFTs and do not trade them on a big scale, you would probably not have to comply with all the KYC requirements from the Austrian supervisory laws. That's from a supervisory law perspective. But then, and that makes it even more complicated, we do not only have to look at supervisory laws here, but also at trade law, because as you know, whenever we have trade law, whenever we sell something, you would actually have to again get a trade license, etc. And there you also have some KYC requirements. And in Austria, again, these KYC requirements are, connected and tied to payments made in cash over a certain value. And therefore, we would argue that if you pay with cryptocurrencies, as long as the law is not amended, you would not have these high standards of KYC under trade law as well. But only, for example, have to have some kind of control that you, if you see something, or if you notice that that you're potentially contracting with a sanctioned person, you would of course have to stop it, etc. So that remains clear. And there's a third aspect that always has to be considered with selling stuff like that is of course criminal law. Yeah, I mean, if you for example have any indications that the money or cryptocurrencies being used for this transaction are involved in money laundering, you would also need to stop it and make sure that you you do not participate in this event, because otherwise this could actually also make you party to that criminal action and make you liable from a criminal point of view. So then that are basically those three pillars that you would also always have to consider when launching a project and selling NFTs, cryptocurrencies, tokens, or whatever. Maybe just one more thing to add here on with regard to the decentralized question, because that actually circles back to the first question. All those laws that I've just said are directed at one party, that is the obliged entity under this law, right? So if you could make sure that your application, your means, whatever, is truly and fully decentralized, so that there is no party that can be obliged by these laws, it could at least be argued that they do not apply. Yeah, that is something that you would need to analyze on a case-by-case basis, and especially, I would think that again, that what you said at the beginning too, if authorities, for example, know that you're responsible for deploying this smart contract or for this mint, they would try to enforce the law on you somehow. And I'm pretty sure they will think of a creative way to do that. So that is something that you always have to keep in mind when really approaching a new business idea.
Yeah, fully agree. The issue is, and you said a couple of interesting things now, that almost all, although I have not seen many smart contracts that were actually decentralized. Almost.
Well, we agree too, because everyone. Sorry to interrupt, but every time we talk about decentralization, we at the end we conclude, well, it's not that decentralized after all.
Yeah, it's just you always or most of the time have some kind of permission to change some kind of parameter or value on the smart contract. Well, then the regulators could easily say, yeah, you have some kind of power over the protocol. So yeah. That's that. And another thing that I found very interesting is when we talk about KYC, and I heard an answer from another lawyer before, but I'm super curious about your opinion here. What do you think about some kind of decentralized KYC? Binance is working on something, not sure how it works. There are soul-bound tokens. There's something called account abstraction that Vitalik and some other authors are working on, and so on. And all try to have some kind of decentralized identity by still having possibly some kind of anonymity, like not directly binding your real identity to it. What's your take on that?
I mean, I think that, and I'm then super curious what the other lawyer said. So if you could summarize that then too, that would be super interesting. But I think you have to differentiate it here. Actually, two things again, right? On the one hand, me as private person that really thinks of it as a cool idea to really move into space without having to identify myself all the time. And on the other hand, the laws, how they are drafted at this time, because at this time, the laws are drafted in a way that you have to identify a natural person to such extent that you really need that you as obliged party are sure that it is this person. And I think this, or at least I'm not aware of decentralized applications that really can can ensure that to the same level as centralized applications can do that at this time. And again, the thought behind the decentralized KYC or having identity is at least in my experience and in my understanding that you do not want to reveal all of your identity, right? And this is totally contradictory to what KYC from the law perspective wants to do, namely really identifying you as natural person. So for me, at this point where we have strict laws that have to be complied with, I don't see the case for decentralized KYC to really replace what we have now as centralized KYC, so to say, or what crypto exchanges or crypto asset service providers you need to do before they enter into a business relationship with a party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that basically aligns with what the other lawyer said as well. I would need to look up the exact things that were said, and that's the reason why I won't say the name now, to not put some sentence in someone's mouth that weren't said exactly that way. But basically, the conclusion was that in the end, you actually, as you said, want to trace someone down if something happens. The different parts of the regulation, not just knowing who you are, or for example, if we talk about zero knowledge proofs and all that fancy stuff, that you can just prove, yeah, well, I'm KYC'd, but you are not seeing it and you don't have the possibility to do so. At some point, there needs to be some kind of way, Yeah. And all that basically gets down to have some kind. Also, personally, I don't think there is something truly decentralized, some truly decentralized KYC out there, and won't ever be because KYC is a gatekeeper, and gatekeepers can't be truly decentralized. It's a spectrum, right? But it can't be on the fully. Because regulations change, right? They get stricter, so there will always be some kind of control by someone. And yeah, that's just my personal take. But you're the expert here, so.
No, that actually aligns with my experience and with at least what I expect. Regulations where to go and also what I've seen in the market so far.
Awesome. Martin, thank you. I would say I have one last question for you, and you already know it. Do you maybe have 3 things that you want? Let's put it into perspective. That you would recommend a business that wants to build a DEX. How should they start? What should they consider? And we focus on Europe or Austria, whatever is easier for you. And what do you want?
Yeah, that is really hard to break it down. But I think the first thing that you really have to keep in mind when you want to start a business in that field is what we have been discussing today, right? Is decentralization is not decentralization. It's not really decentralization, and only because you call something decentralized, it's not decentralized, not in the technical sense, and especially not in the legal sense. So when you really want to set up a business model in a decentralized way, you would have to really analyze on a case-by-case basis whether it fulfills the criteria of decentralization. or whether you fall within supervisory laws or other laws as well. Then you should choose your place of operation. At least, I mean, we haven't discussed that much today, but until MiCA is in force, there are different legislations in the different countries, and also with so you have to choose your your place of jurisdiction where you want to set up a business. If you set up a business, and this is again an indicator, if you set up a business, you will probably not be decentralized. So, but that again, but then you should, if you're not decentralized and if you opt for a registration or something like that, you should really carefully consider what where you want to set up your business, because this comes with a lot of strings and also with a lot of responsibilities but also possibilities. For example, I said already, you typically advertise in the language of the country you have your office is set up. So if it's important for you to advertise in German, you should set up in Germany or in Austria, and then again consider the different regulations there where it's easier for you to set up. And also, again, there's a lot of tax questions related to that. The third thing maybe is that you should, in case you're not sure whether you fall under a regulation or not, it is always better to approach the supervisory authority beforehand, and just explain to them the business model and your legal qualifications and your legal conclusions, because at this stage you can very often talk to the supervisory authority and find a solution together, whereas if you start your business and then they see that you're doing something that might fall within a supervisory law and you don't have the license, it is very hard to convince them that you didn't do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm. Wow, super interesting. You brought me to a, let's say, more funny point of view when you were talking about the language of your application. Because if you target a country, then you need to follow that regulation. Thinking of German, we have 3 major countries, Switzerland, German, and Austria. And if you want, all of these have some kind of different regulations. So if you have your website in German, you basically, strictly speaking, would need to follow all 3 of them, right?
Sorry?
Yeah, I just want to drop that joke. You could write in dialect, in Swiss dialect.
Okay.
Yeah, that's...
But maybe just one last thing to make that clear. If you want, if you are registered in Austria, for example, you can advertise in German, of course, only directing to the Austrian market, but you can advertise in German without being registered in Germany. Of course, you cannot go to Germany as a country as such and advertise, make there a big marketing campaign, because you would not be allowed to have marketing activities in Germany unless you're registered there too. But of course, if you are registered in one of those 3 countries, so to say, you can advertise in this language. But again, of course, only in this country. So just to make that clear.
Love it. Okay. Sounds like a useful nuance of the law.
Absolutely.
Yeah, otherwise, would be crazy. If you're in America, you would need to comply with all regulations all over the world out of the box, right? Because everyone speaks to some extent English.
Yeah.
But yeah, awesome. Hey, thanks, Martin, for doing this with me. I really learned a lot and enjoyed it, and I hope the audience as well. So if there's nothing that you want to add or drop, I will put all links of Martin that he wants me to into the video description. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wavect, the web-free software company that understands what you want.